Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Allison Weiss, and I'm the Associate Director of Corporate and Executive Education at the Brown School of Professional Studies. We are so excited that you have joined us for today's webinar. I think something that Baba and I both think about a lot is that there have been so much news coverage around the importance of AI and the potential effectiveness of AI. And all of that is really true and really important. But often the piece that's missing is the piece around responsible and ethical AI. And as a result, we're seeing this huge gap right now, which is really interesting to study between business leaders' excitement over the potential for AI to make their workplace more effective, more productive, and possibly more profitable, and the general sentiment around the kind of normal workers around the levels of fear, trust, and safety around the tool. And so as a result, we're really excited to be focusing today on responsible AI, what every leader needs to know in 2026, because AI is not a tool that lives just within the IT department. It's really something that every leader needs to have the tools and the skills to be able to lead in a responsible and ethical way. So thank you for being here today, and thank you for being interested in this topic. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the School of Professional Studies for anyone who may be new to some of our programming. I'll then introduce Baba and hand things over to him, and he will lead us through what every leader needs to know about AI in 2026. So, the mission of the Brown School of Professional Studies is to inspire and prepare graduate and professional learners to transform the way the world works for good. And that's a mission that I'm inspired by every day because we know that leaders like you have an outsized impact on the productivity, the creativity, and also the mental and emotional well-being of the workforce. And so we're excited to give you the skills that you need in these nice little bite-sized chunks within these master classes to help you to lead your organizations and your teams into the future to make the future even better. And I think another thing we're really inspired by is the fact that this type of learning can bring Brown education outside of the campus walls and bring it straight to you at home or at work. We offer a whole portfolio of programming. After Baba's masterclass, I'll come back on and tell you a little bit more about a couple that you might be particularly interested in. But just to give you a sense, we have 33 professional and early career master's programs, including a master's of technology leadership program, which some people here may be interested in. We offer custom programs for organizations. So if you are a team leader who's thinking about how do I help my team implement AI in an effective and responsible way, we can actually design a solution tailored to you and your needs. And then lastly, we offer over 30 non-credit programs, including one that Baba teaches on responsible AI and that I'll tell you more about at the end. I'm going to introduce and hand things over to our incredible faculty lead. And I also just want to give you one more housekeeping note. If you have any questions at any point today, please don't hesitate to ask them by clicking on your bottom bar of Zoom, clicking on Q&A, and typing and submitting your questions there. I'll monitor the Q&A throughout today's session, and so that way we'll get to as many questions as possible if you're entering them as you have them. If you have comments or you want to share resources with one another, that's also great. Do that by clicking on the bottom bar of Zoom, clicking on chat, and adding it to chat. So with that, I would love to introduce our incredible faculty lead for today's session, Baba Prasad. He's a professor of the practice of leadership at Brown University and an author and expert in the fields of strategic management, innovation, and leadership. He's known for his work on agile leadership and organizational agility, most notably through his book, Nimble, Make Yourself and Your Company Resilient in the Age of Constant Change, which was endorsed by CEOs like Brad Smith, Frank D'Souza, and Franz van Houten, and business thinkers like Adam Grant and Vijay Govindarajan. In Nimble, Baba integrates advances in theories of human intelligence and strategic leadership to arrive at a unique framework, which I love and have learned a lot from, for executives and organizations to adapt and thrive in rapidly changing environments. And he also has a background in robotics and artificial intelligence. So this has been just a perfect fit to have this expertise in leadership and the technology kind of combined, with degrees from the Indian Institute of Science, the University of Hyderabad, Kansas State University, and the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. He's taught at several prestigious business schools in the USA and India and has been a consultant for various global organizations, as well as a columnist for Mint, the Indian business newspaper. Welcome, Baba. Thank you for being here today and for teaching us today.
Thank you so much, Allison. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you for taking the hour out for us and to listen to some of my thoughts. And I hope to give back to you, not just let you go empty-handed. So I want to make this session go in two ways. One is I want to give you some thoughts to think about. So we often think about ethics and we think about AI, and when we the big debates today are about ethics, but I want to stretch that a little beyond and say it's not just ethics, it's what we call responsibility. And when we talk about responsibility, then we start thinking about various other dimensions in the organization that come into play. And so what are those dimensions and how do we actually address this in a more holistic way rather than just being focused on ethics? And ethics is a big component, but not all. Okay. And the second thing is I want to give you some frameworks to take back. So, today's Thursday. If you're back at work tomorrow or on Monday morning, how can you sit with your team and what can you do about these things that have provoked some thinking about, hopefully? How would you put that into action? What kinds of frameworks can we use to implement and think about AI in a more holistic, integrated fashion into the workplace? So these are my two goals that I've set for myself in terms of deliverables for you. Okay. So let me share my PowerPoint and then we will take that forward. Okay, here's my, okay. So the topic today, of course, as Alison said, was responsible AI. Every leader needs to know in 2026. Okay. AI is like most technology when it comes out and is a very rapidly evolving field. And before your feet hit the ground, you're actually running, and then the ground is slipping beneath your feet. And so, how do you actually keep abreast of things? And then on top of it, be abreast in a way that is responsible as a leader. That you're having some kind of responsibility towards various stakeholders, right from your team to your employees across the organization, to thinking about the customers and the outward facing functions, all the stuff that comes into an organization's perspective. How do you actually be responsible for that? So this leads us to thinking a little bit more about responsibility. And of course, this is a heady time. Okay? And AI, I call it the Holy Grail, but everybody seems to be achieving the Holy Grail, grabbing the Holy Grail somehow. And one of the key things here is when you think about AI, there's so much hype about it, and there's so much also some deliverables about it, right? AI seems to be everywhere. We seem to be able to do everything. And, AI, as the CEOs promote it, is, we're now moving toward artificial general intelligence, AGI. And AGI is supposed to be mimicking human cognition. And so we're already there, according to Anthropic CEO. By 2026, we will be there if you're not already there. And, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, creator of ChatGPT, claims AGI might already have been here and gone by without us noticing it. And now he sets the new goal as super intelligence. Wow. Okay, so this is a lot of stuff happening here, and so we're now soaring in the air, with our wings, and suddenly, sometimes it's very hard reality, and those wings clip off, and we land in the ground with a thud. And this happened to me yesterday. I was working with Claude, and I was trying to do some scheduling for my writing and research, and Claude kept messing up the schedule. It couldn't get dates right. And so this is a bit of a conversation I wanted to share with you about where we are in terms of reality. So I was frustrated, and so you can see the spelling mistakes and the grammar. So I said, if today, Wednesday, is January 21st, what is last Tuesday? What date is last Tuesday? And Cloud immediately comes back. And instead of January 13th, it says January 14th. And it also gives me the reasoning below. Okay. Jan 21st is Wednesday, so it counts backward and says Jan 14th is Tuesday. And you can see between Jan 15th and Jan 14th down there, It skipped to Wednesday. So it's got me even more irritated. And I trolled myself and I said, what explains this mess? I'm curious. And so Claude's response is this. You're right to ask, there's a serious failure on my part, and here's what went wrong. It gives me a core problem. I made an initial error and compounded it by not checking carefully. When you corrected me, I got flustered and made increasingly sloppy mistakes instead of slowing down and thinking clearly. Now, who says AI is not human? This looks like one of my sophomore students. So, but then what AI does is it goes on and gives me a detailed explanation of why it went wrong. Okay, so I made an initial error, cascading errors, careless counting. So here we are, AI with all its high-flying AGI kind of promises can't do a calendar computation, can't count backward 7 days. So where are we with this? So let's not get blown away by the hype of AI. It's a very useful tool, and when used wisely, in fact, that's the book I'm writing now called Wisdom, in the age of intelligence. And so when used wisely, it can deliver tremendous promise. It has tremendous potential. Now, the question is, how do we get that potential out of AI? And that's what we're going to talk about a bit today. So here's one paradox that you think about when you think of AI. In the last year, 2025, in the first half, and this is actually ballooning, the investment in AI is ballooning. Companies across the world invested $47 billion in AI initiatives. And unfortunately, 89% of them delivered minimal returns. Now, I'm working on a paper which talks about why this happens. There are many reasons here. Okay, there's a fear of being left out. There's a fear of of actually investing for the future because you don't invest now, you won't have a platform, etc. But there are many reasons for this. But basically, this is the status quo right now. That about 90% of the projects don't pay back in terms of ROI. But that's not our concern today. But our concern is to say, if AI has promise and potential, how do we bring that out? So what I see is that when we look at AI, beyond the issues of ethics, we need to think about four different aspects. Okay? And that these are four responsibilities that we have as leaders. First is technical responsibility. Do we know exactly what AI does? So, what's the difference between what AI actually does and what we think it does? Second, what is the operational responsibility that we have? That is, when AI comes in, it actually changes the plumbing in the organization. It changes how decisions flow. It changes how work flows. When AI is changing all these things in your organization, do we know how it's doing that? And can we, at some point, pull the plug on it, or are we locking ourselves into something that is inextricable? So, um, operational responsibility is the second responsibility that we'll be talking about. The third responsibility is stakeholder responsibility. So, well, AI does give benefits and AI has costs. Who incurs the costs and who gets the benefits? And if there are inequities in this, then that's not a simple, oh, yeah, we just got through. It's actually something that's going to come and bite you in the long run. So, this is an important responsibility that we have towards stakeholders. And finally, the systemic responsibility, the fourth level, which is more strategic in its consideration, right? So what happens when everybody in the industry gets AI? So far, we've been bringing in AI because we think we have a competitive advantage because we bring the AI in, but then if everybody has AI and everybody is intelligent, where do we get a strategic, competitive advantage from this? What can be sustaining here? So this is a fourth kind of responsibility for us to think about as we bring in AI into the organization. Let me talk a little bit about in detail about each of these responsibilities. And for some of them, I give you a case to back that up. Okay. Level one is technical responsibility. So the idea between what is different between the lab where we're testing all this stuff and actual production floor where we're deploying the AI systems. So in the lab, typically what happens is we have controlled data sets and we have a validation, which is often one time, and the conditions are optimal. So because we've created an artificial testing lab, we're not facing the reality checks that a real world application can bring in. Okay. In production, what happens is that messiness creeps in on us. So the real world is very messy, it has jagged ends, and these come in and actually upset the plan that we had, with the neat plans that we had. They get upset, and there's continuous drift. It starts out quite well, but as the system progresses, it starts to accumulate a lot of junk, perhaps, and moves in different directions than we had anticipated. And ultimately, it leads us to some kinds of edge cases where things topple over, and we have to, recoup for that. And here's a case study for that. Workday is a hiring AI application, so it allows the companies to screen resumes and recruit employees. So it is a screening system used by hundreds of employers, and it had passed all kinds of initial fairness audits. So it was deployed, if you remember back in when the early days of AI, Amazon actually brought it in for recruitment purposes, and then discovered that Amazon's it had a lot of biases within the system, which would allow only certain kinds of profiles would to go in, and as a result, Amazon had to, in a big fiasco, withdraw that recruitment system. Okay. Now, this AI, the Workday system, had gone through all those audits and was supposed to be pretty sturdy. But after it was deployed, one it found that there was some profiling happening there, and so one black person, Mobley, in California, filed a case, and lots of scrutiny happened. As a result, the federal judge certified that this is eligible for a nationwide collective action, and it covers millions of applicants over the age of 40. So while color, gender, etc., was taken care of, age and disability had not been taken care of. And so that came into picture, and now the settlement amounts are expected to be in the tens of millions of dollars. So you see how AI, without that technical responsibility, can actually become a big hindrance. It's not just a cost factor for the company, but it's also a societal factor. You're actually denying people jobs that they could have well fulfilled, and it's a societal kind of uh, irresponsibility. So, technical responsibility actually is checking all this stuff within the organization before deploying. And so, some questions that you should be asking is, what happens when our AI encounters data it wasn't trained on? How do we know when our AI is degrading? Who is monitoring this continuously? So for instance, one solution would be to create real-time dashboards that track accuracy across demographics. Now, this is easier said than done because it's very expensive, and also it's not very complete. You can't do this all the time. So how do we handle this as a problem? And so again, it comes back to, well, who designed AI? Humans. So it comes back to how humans come into this picture. Yeah. The idea then is, I'll give you some frameworks after we finish discussing all the responsibilities. There's a neat way to actually do this using human expertise to check this technical responsibility. The second responsibility is an operational responsibility. So back in, actually, I started working in AI in the mid 80s, and I started working in computer vision, and I have gone through all the winters and springs of AI since then. And this is a thing about technology. The technology actually has a lot of potential, and often it doesn't or often it's not used to be able to its full extent. And so as a result, we end up either chucking technology or blaming it for various things. So when we bring in technology, and this I saw on Wall Street when I was working with financial companies bringing in technology, outsourcing was a big deal in the mid 90s. And when companies brought in outsourcing, we were doing a study at Wharton to see how many banks know how to rank banks across business processes. And we chose 11 basic business processes. And believe it or not, out of 114 banks that we interviewed, 108 banks could not give us the full process end to end. For instance, a checking account opening process is standard across all banks. So we wanted to rate them in terms of their efficiency. And 108 banks out of 114 banks could not tell us because the knowledge was all piecemeal, or some outsourcing person who had come and had implemented the process and gone away. And so that knowledge was now lacking. So when humans lose the capability, when technology comes in, there's a danger of humans losing capabilities. In this case, the capability to outline a process end to end. But really, when it comes to AI, as Alison said, it's not just technology that does some stuff. It's actually in our lives, in our face, doing our work. So when do we recognize that AI is wrong? How can we recognize that? How can we step in when systems fail? How do we maintain judgment in complex situations? So these are things that AI can take over, but by giving it off to AI, we kind of lose that capability within the organization. And you have to be very, very careful that you don't do that. Because then when push comes to shove and we have to stand up and answer, we can't blame it on AI. Yeah. So here's to wrap that that up. Basically, Mount Sinai Medical School, Medical College, hospital in New York, analyzed 1.7 million AI-generated medical recommendations using 9 different, large language models, and tested with same symptoms. Only the demographic details were changed. And what happened was when the demographics pointed to minority patients, the AI misdiagnosed 31 times, 31% of the time. And it gives higher false negative for pneumonia in rural populations. So you see that there is all kinds of biases that come into the organization, into the system, even when you have accounted for that. And moreover, the systems can explain the recommendations, but the explanations didn't reveal the demographic bias. So our second responsibility is to say when the system is operating, how can we actually think about all these issues, right? Or the 3 issues that I talked about here. When an AI is wrong, can we recognize that the AI is wrong? If the system is failing, can we step in and make corrections? And if the situation is complex, that there's multiple stuff that's going on there, can we bring in judgment despite the AI? Can we override the AI's judgment and bring in our own judgment? So these are things that you need to be careful about in terms of responsibility from an operational perspective. The third one, so here, just a quick thumbtack for what you should be doing here. Look at the dangers of each of these. If AI is itself making decisions, that's a high risk venture. You need to have very strong safeguards there. If AI is informing decisions, then it's medium risk. So humans can actually evaluate what the AI is inputting. And finally, the least risky is when AI supports human decisions. So humans retain full agency, but the AI kind of provides the information that we can use to make those decisions. So this is the lowest risk. So quickly looking at any application and marking it as this will give us an idea of what kind of implications it has in terms of risk and benefits. Okay. So level 3 here, this is a stakeholder level. Okay. So which is who wins and who pays. So here what happens is because organizations are generally created as profit-making entities, and the economic model definitely of an organization is to maximize profits, we get into optimization traps. So AI optimizes what you measure. If you measure shareholder value, which is basically your stock price, um, guess who pays? The customer. And here's a story for you to look at this. So Air Canada had a chatbot, and the chatbot told customers that they could retroactively apply for bereavement. Bereavement, they wanted to cancel, and so they wanted to, but they couldn't do it in time. So they could. The chatbot said you could do it. The company's own website said the opposite. Now, this went to court, and Air Canada argued that the chatbot was a separate legal entity responsible for its own actions. And of course, the ruling went against it. And the ruling said the chatbot is still part of Air Canada's website. It should be obvious that Air Canada is responsible for all information on its website. And companies cannot dissociate themselves from the actions of their AI tools. So now, when you think about this, and you look at what's happening, like what we saw with my cloud experience yesterday, 3 to 27% of hallucination rates, even in controlled chatbot environments. So they tell you information that they're hallucinating. Okay, they give you that's really irresponsible. Secondly, of consumers who used AI customer service, who saw zero benefits, 19%. Okay, so there's not any much benefits. In fact, they abandon chatbots often. So this brings us to a question of, when you're thinking about bringing in a chatbot, an AI-based chatbot, for whose benefit are you bringing it, and who's, getting the, who's bearing the costs on this? So this is a big question that comes up. So here's one very quick kind of capture for you. If you can list out customers, employees, shareholders, and community, and say who's benefiting and who's paying the cost, and then talk about, you can do it in numbers or you can do it in check marks, and then you see the net impact and you come to this conclusion. If one group captures all the benefits while another bears all the costs, then there's a responsibility problem, and that we call the stakeholder responsibility problem. Yeah. So there are very quick kind of things, but I'll give you a small framework at the end to address each of these. So level four is, as I said, looking outward, more strategic, looking not just at the current context, but of a futuristic context, and taking a long-term view and also a wide-angle view. So not just the company and just not me, but beyond the company and beyond profits. What happens when, so this is one of the questions that you could be asking if you take up this kind of perspective. What happens when everyone does exactly what you're doing, which is bringing in AI to do this particular function or offer this particular service? So if one company automates, of course, we know it's competitive advantage. But this is technology that's available to everybody. So anybody who has the money can buy it. There's no expertise involved here, really. So what happens? Entire industry automates. As a result, everybody is marching lockstep. So then who can cut costs, who can offer the service at the lowest price. So then this becomes a collective harm to the industry, and it's a race to the bottom in terms of prices. So this is, you know, systemic responsibility is more strategic in its outlook, looking outward and, thinking long term, not just long term, but also thinking about who are the constituents that we are affecting with this particular effort. So these are four things. And so questions that you could ask, other questions. What happens to the labor market? And one of the key things that some consulting companies are saying is, oh, AI does all the stuff at the entry consultant level, so we don't need to hire more new consultants. We can just bring in AI to do that. But then thinking longer term, if at some point we stop hiring fresh people out of college to be consultants, then when the current crop of consultants, retires, who's going to step to the middle level? Who's going to step up to the high level? So, we're not thinking long term if we just bring in and substitute AI for labor. What skills disappear from the workforce? We talked a little bit about that in the earlier responsibilities, but there are certain skills that can disappear from the workforce, and that can actually be very harmful for the company. Okay? What vulnerabilities do we create? So are we exposing ourselves in some ways by creating AI? So, for instance, can we not do without AI because we've been so used to it? And if something happens and AI collapses, have we become vulnerable? What can no longer, so these two are combined together, so what can no longer be done without AI? So there's kind of the flip side. We are become kind of enslaved to AI. So any of these levels can create vulnerability, right? Missing any of these levels, technical responsibility, then we can end up in production failures. If we skip operational responsibilities, then we lose the organizational capabilities. Okay. We skip stakeholders, we're ignoring some stakeholders, then you might harm people who you're serving, you might harm society, you might harm the organization itself. So you have to be very careful about which stakeholders are being addressed and how the equity from how the returns from AI is being equitably distributed. And finally, of course, the strategic component. If you skip the systemic thing, then there can be a collapse of of the industry itself, offering basically become a cutthroat industry where you're offering um, basically you're competing primarily on price and not on quality. Yeah. So what do we do? So I put together something that you can take back, and I think the PowerPoint will this will be actually available to you later. Um, a leader's action framework is primarily there are three practical interventions you can use Monday morning, and so intervention one is something I call the pre-mortem. That is before AI application or AI deployment has died. Before you in fact deploy it, you sit down with your team and you discuss this question. It's 18 months from today, and our AI deployment has failed spectacularly and then embarrassed us publicly. What happened? So you do kind of a fictional retrospect. What technical failures happened? So what could go wrong that nobody caught in testing? So you now speculate. So you're now bulletproofing that AI system before it fails. The second is the organizational, you know, problem. Sorry, which is basically you start talking about what happens within the organization. Why didn't people step up and speak? Was there something wrong in our reporting structure? Was there something wrong in our, organizational hierarchies? What blocks prevented people from voicing their opinions? Why didn't we actually find the fault? So these questions are organizational dynamics. So make these questions, answer these questions before the system fails. In fact, before the system is deployed. Same thing with stakeholders. Okay? Is there a danger that this particular system that we're putting in will benefit one stakeholder against another? And is the cost also being borne equitably across the organization? So across the stakeholders. So these are questions that will actually prevent us from seeing any kind of lopsided benefits and costs kind of distribution. And finally, as I said, the strategic component. Why didn't we think of things before? What became obvious too late? What were our, blind sides? What were our blinkers that we put on? And, what can we take off now that we can see into the future? Okay. So after you answer these questions, build safeguards for each scenario before you do the deployment. So this is the, right at the beginning, you start doing this before you deploy the system. So this is one takeaway for you. So this is one kind of framework that you can use to if you're deploying AI systems. The second one, the, the second one is to have a devil's advocate in your organization. So form something called a red team, which is basically showing a red flag or a red signal to you. So you are assign someone or a team to argue why your AI deployment, the one that you're considering right now, is irresponsible. So give them the four, responsibilities, and say evaluate this from those four, from the perspective of those four responsibilities. Now, to do that, you have to give them access to all technical documentation. You must allow them to permission to interview stakeholders. You must provide protection from organizational pressures. So there shouldn't be any champions exerting some pressure on them. There shouldn't be any detractors trying to force them into a different kind of conclusion. So make it as unbiased as possible. Also, have them present these findings in a formal way rather than just informal backroom chatter, right? So once you do this, actually, you will find that you will have a lot of problems that you didn't anticipate. So this is again done before your deployment. So you'll get a good feedback about this and a good analysis, given that the team is as thorough as possible in its evaluation. So this is a intervention two that you can do. Yeah? And intervention three is actually make this a review every quarter. That is every quarter you review all the four responsibilities. Are we monitoring continuously for technical issues? Is there a drift that has crept in since we deployed and it's taking the system away from its original intent? So how do we bring that back? Secondly, if we have to do that, are we allowing humans to intervene effectively if we need to pull the system back? So what exactly are we doing in those kinds of things? What operational control are we retaining within the organization, and not to let technology just take off on its own? Level three is the stakeholder. Again, benefits distributed fairly, costs distributed fairly. So you assess this every quarter, and that's a much better system than having to do it only when the crisis happens. Okay, and fourth is of course the systemic strategic kind of impact. And would we be comfortable if everyone did this? And now here, what you do is you give yourself points on these out of 10. So then you have a total score out of 40. Okay. So this is something that's an ongoing quarterly review. So these are three different ways in which you can actually use some frameworks to keep your deployment responsible. So when do you halt the deployment? If the technical red flags come up, performance degrading for specific demographic groups is one example, but it also could be for some certain sections of geographies, so it fails for certain geographies. So you can think about this as being performance that is not uniform across constituencies, whether you define the constituencies as people or geographies or countries, so those kinds of things. So technical red flags come in, and so you need to be able to handle halt deployment at that time. There may be some operational red flags. So what's happening is that AI is producing so quickly and so much data that humans are not really examining the data properly, and they're just rubber stamping the decisions that AI is making. So as a result, what happens is that you can actually let the machine take over decision making within the organization. So you have to think about operational red flags. The stakeholder red flags, as I already said, is that some groups are capturing benefits at all the benefits, and some others are bearing all the costs. So there's lopsidedness in both benefit sharing and in cost sharing. So this is not a good scenario, because right now it might look very rosy and nice if you're the part of the group that's capturing all the benefits and not paying the cost. But in the long run, it will come back to hurt you. So this is where the third kind of red flag comes in. And of course, with the strategic thing, it's very difficult to evaluate right away. So, but you need to keep your eye on the goal. You need to keep your handle on the rudder and steer the company in the right direction. So there is a strategic imperative all the time. So one way to think about this is, if we meet these four responsibilities, address them, think about them, and address them properly, then we actually stand to gain competitive advantage. So organizations that master these four responsibilities will move faster. They will also do more sustainable deployment, things that stay on, not just from when I talk about sustainability, it's not just from an environmental perspective, which of course is important, but also, is this deployment sustainable? Can we continue to do this year after year? Then we will also build more trust among all our stakeholders, whether it's customers or employees or owners, stockholders, or regulators. And finally, we will be able to attract better talent. So as I said, the resources that I've given you are the key frameworks, the responsibility stack, which is the four levels. I gave you the pre-mortem exercise, behave as if the application died and ask reasons for why it died. Or the red team structure, which basically says, try and understand why this particular system could fail. And so what can we do about that right now? And finally, an ongoing kind of check through the quarterly review scoreboard. So these are some key frameworks that you can take away from this uh, session. Um, Finally, to sum up, what every leader needs to know is this: that bias testing at deployment is necessary, but be aware that it is insufficient. The real world is actually comes with a lot of jagged ends, and it's very difficult to predict what happens, what kind of data comes in to be applied into the system, and data that the system is not trained on. And so as a result, you can be doing all kinds of biases, letting all kinds of biases enter the system. So this is very important to remember, that while we while we certify that it is free of bias at deployment, it is necessary to keep monitoring that it's free of bias. Second, explainability without accuracy is dangerous. The system can explain a lot of stuff, like it did with my clot thing, that it's told me all the reasons for why it went wrong. But without the accuracy that comes with human monitoring, this can become pretty dangerous. Human oversight only works if humans have real agency. So you might be deploying a system, but if it's creating conditions where human oversight becomes difficult, then it's not going to work. If it's putting out too much data, it's putting out too much confusion, and people can only rubber stamp at the end, then that's not such a great system. So then finally, of course, as I've been saying throughout this masterclass, we need to have the four responsibilities clearly outlined, and we need to think about them and make sure that we're employing those four responsibilities: technical responsibility, operational responsibility, stakeholder responsibility, and systemic or strategic responsibility. So the organizations that will win in 2026 with AI, they're not running in to develop and deploy systems. They're actually doing it more thoughtfully by applying these four principles. So now I think I'll hand it over to Alison, and then come back to take questions.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. This was absolutely incredible. I learned a lot. And I love that you ended with resources and next steps because I actually want to expand on one additional resource and next step for this group. If you love learning from Baba as much as I do, and I do, I feel like I learn something every single time. We do have a class that Baba is teaching on this very topic. And so I'm going to skip through some of the stats because Baba's already done such a great job with this. But what the story I do want you to take away from this is that the research shows that AI is a really powerful tool that can positively impact your bottom line, make you and your workforce more efficient, make you more creative, and make you as an individual more competitive in the career market if you're looking to pivot your career or advance in your career. However, and this is really important, distrust is really high and with reasonable reasons that, Baba showed you about accuracy. And they're nervous that their jobs are going to be replaced by AI. And so, as a result, the piece that we really feel is missing from the conversation is the piece about talking about how do you adopt AI in a responsible way that actually empowers your workforce and doesn't replace your workforce and takes into account all the leadership skills around change management, communication, and effective execution that will ensure that it's not just another technology that's being used haphazardly or perhaps not very well, but is used strategically and with humans at the center. We designed this program with three target audiences in mind. The first is managers and leaders at all parts of the organization. So you are the folks who are identifying the opportunities to incorporate AI into your organization or your team, and you're concerned about ensuring that it empowers your workers, not replaces. Secondly, you might be a technology or risk professional. So perhaps you are looking at how do we set governance practices to make sure that this works out the best, or you're thinking about like what risks might we run as a result and how do we mitigate those? And then lastly, I would say just by showing up today, you have expressed interest and we would love for you to be a part of the program. The program is a 3-week program, so it's designed to be pretty short, pretty accessible, but still very meaty and meaningful. In those 3 weeks, you meet 2 times per week for live online sessions taught by Dr. Prasad. And you'll meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays from April 14th through April 30th from 5 to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The learning journey starts with an introduction to AI, so a little bit of level setting around key AI concepts, analyzing the role of AI in modern businesses, and you identifying your role within it, and assessing the potential impact on various industries and society. In session 2, you'll look at strategic AI and human collaboration, where you look to see how can we actually make sure both sides are learning from one another and getting better together, and how do we enhance workforce adaptability, resilience, collaborative learning, critical thinking, and creativity, because this is a huge change and that can be really daunting. In session 3, you'll look at how to build a culture of co-intelligence at your organization. So how do you ensure that both sides are learning from one another instead of supplanting one another? In session 4, you'll look at communication and change management strategies to ensure that you're effectively communicating AI concepts to non-technical audiences and that you're helping to manage change and perhaps fear around change related to AI by addressing skepticism, hesitation, and pushback. In session 5, you'll look at the ethics, accountability, and global legislation, of which there's not that much, but it's changing really rapidly, to identify and analyze the ethical challenges in deployment, audit practices to ensure transparency and fairness, and ensure that you are in compliance with the relevant governance and regulatory frameworks coming out. And lastly, in session 6, you will bring it all together to help create kind of a framework for strategic AI and human collaboration, specifically by looking at case studies of both organizations that are doing really, really well and those that are not doing so well at implementing this strategically. By the end of this course, you'll be able to assess AI's impact on people, communities, and the workforce. You'll be able to review organizational AI ethics and governance and align your practices with new regulations. You'll be able to enhance human capabilities with AI-driven technology by promoting a culture of human AI collaboration. And you'll be able to effectively communicate AI changes to ease adoption, make it a little bit easier by building a culture of adaptability, transparency, and ethical decision making. You'll leave with AI fluency without needing a technical background. There's no coding required in this course. You'll have hands-on strategic frameworks and case studies to implement and manage AI in your organization. You'll be able to network with both peers and experts, so you don't feel so alone in trying to figure this out. We hear that a lot, that people feel alone. And you'll graduate with a certificate from Brown University. So I hope that you are excited about this class. I love this class and that you'd like to join us. We do have limited seats available. They're filled on a first come, first serve basis, and the early bird pricing is available until March 14th. And so we would love for you to join us. I'll put a link in the chat if you're interested. And then I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to get to your questions, but I also do want to point out that we also have professional master's programs to continue your learning journey. So if you take this course, you love it, you want to keep learning from us, the one that I think is likely most relevant to this group is the Masters of Technology Leadership, which is a 12-month program where you'll learn competencies like analytical decision making, strategic thinking, AI, cybersecurity, big data, and leadership. So thank you for being here. I have seen a lot of great questions are already coming in. As a reminder, click on the bottom bar of Zoom, click on Q&A, and submit your questions there. So we'll start with the first question, which I thought this was a really good one, Baba, which is, who is actually responsible if I use AI to make a decision and it goes wrong? Is it the AI's fault? Is it my fault? Who's held responsible?
Yeah, a very interesting question. This is a constant thing as the maker or the doer. So is the AI, somebody made the AI, so is that person responsible, or is the doer who actually using the thing? And of course, it depends on the context and so where you're using. But typically, what happens is that, and as we saw in the Air Canada case, you can't just get away by saying, "Oh, it's the AI's fault." It is somebody, you deployed it, and you deployed it for particular reasons, especially for profit. So you were responsible. Ultimately, it is your fault that the AI did wrong. So that is why this kind of responsibility, grid becomes very important for us to go through. So we're making sure that the AI that we're deploying is not just coming with the manufacturer's caveats, but we actually have our own tests to make sure that it's doing what it should be doing.
Thank you. It's a great question. Or sorry, that's a great response, but it was also a great question. So thank you for the question as well. Another person asked, when it comes to energy and environmental implications, how do we manage and prioritize our uses of AI responsibly?
This is a very tricky question. So organizations, companies, especially in a capitalistic economy, are set up to be profit generators, right? So it is a for-profit enterprise. But then at the same time, I have always believed that business has a social responsibility, that business should be for the good. And I'm, you know, our mission at Brown is also that, how do we train people to be doing stuff for the world, not just for themselves? So, in that sense, what I would say is that there is a responsibility when I talk about the systemic responsibility here, that you need to look out for the world. And so not just be going and become rapaciously, harnessing the world's resources for our own profit, but also think about the long term. So this is where I think you need to um, put in more thinking, to bring in more of the responsibility from a systemic perspective, not just from the organization perspective, but think about the larger systems at play here. What are we doing to the world's resources, to the Earth's resources? What kind of pollution are we crossing to the world? How much energy are we consuming at whose expense? All these things become, that's why I say it's a wide angle lens, not just the long term, but also the wide angle lens. Who are we affecting and how? And what happens in the long run? So these are questions that companies need to step back and ask, because we can run away with a lot of stuff in AI at this rate. The way AI progresses, the energy centers, the data consumption, all the stuff will require huge amounts of energy. And where is that energy coming from? It's a very important question to be thinking about.
Thank you. We also have two questions about AI in teaching. So one asks, what's your guidance to university educators on the uses or misuses of AI in academic learning? And then the second one was asking, how has AI changed your personal approach to teaching?
Very interesting, because I've just been invited to be part of an international group on AI pedagogy. So, how do we teach about AI? How do we teach students about AI within university systems? And there's this very immediate response that we all have, that we clamp down on AI and say, don't use AI for your responses. But there's another thing that, whether we like it or not, whether we talk about booms and busts, AI is here to stay, because we have tasted AI and we know what it can do. So the question then becomes, how do we fashion our students' thinking into working with AI, not just substituting our thinking with AI, with what AI does? So can we use it in more productive ways? And this is an ongoing challenge. But I see that one of the key things that we need to be doing is um, not banning AI, but making students think about how they use AI. And I've seen one very interesting experiment where an instructor asked students to use AI if necessary, but then explain why AI came to that conclusion in terms of responding to an assignment. So that puts them into thinking about AI, which is a very interesting, you know, um, way to approach the AI problem in education.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Another question was, sorry, I'm trying to find it again. There it is. Who is responsible when we observe that AI is harming the public? So this is a little bit different than the first question about, if I use it and it messes up, what happens? So in this case, they're talking about some of the public health, mental health, and other societal harm that we're seeing because people are seeking care from AI platforms that are not, clinicians and not medically trained.
There was a very interesting experiment in the last administration, the presidential administration, which was to come up with an AI charter of rights kind of thing, right? Where you actually say, okay, if AI violates some things, who is responsible and how do we redress that problem? And unfortunately, it was scrapped with the current administration. But then Europe does have similar things, like there is something about human rights and how do you actually think about AI and what happens with AI in terms of human rights. So these are questions that come up there. And so we are still feeling our way around these, but that's one of the directions in which we can progress, where we come up with a charter of rights for individuals when AI does harm, or even to actually guide them in thinking about how to use AI correctly. What should the expectations be about AI kind of stuff.
Thank you. And we've had a lot of questions and they're great questions about harm, but I also want to make sure we're giving time and spotlight to the positive. And so this is a great question that asked, can you give some examples of positive and effective AI deployments and describe the success factors? Who would you consider the AI leaders who are deploying this really well?
Yeah. Well, actually, there are some very good companies that are using, some companies that have had great success with using AI. And there are some important lessons that come out of this. For instance, Klarna, who's a customer service company, was using AI, and actually it found that the benefits were almost 50% in terms of cost savings, and in fact, even in terms of efficiencies of handling customer queries. Okay. But then they discovered that just having AI is not going to be enough. And so what they had to do was actually scale back and bring some of those people that they had fired back into the process, so that now it could be much more of an AI plus human integration. So these are some important learning lessons, for us as we go, as we put our baby steps forward in the trying to cross the chasm between AI on one hand and people on the other hand. So we're learning a lot in that in that endeavor, and so there are these companies like Klarna who can actually do that.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I can't believe we are already at the end of our time. It has really flown, and these questions have been great. Thank you for asking such thoughtful questions. So I'll end with this final question, which is a lot of people in the chat are expressing overwhelm, but also enthusiasm and excitement for the potential. So, what advice would you give for people on where do we start? Like, if I was to walk away today and, open my chat GPT or equivalent, like, what is one thing I can do differently today to increase my productivity and efficiency, but with the responsible lens?
Yeah, very, very good question. And this is exactly what I want to push, that you can't run away from this technology. It's not like the old technologies where we used to bring in and say, okay, the factory got automated. It doesn't matter to me how this was produced. I still have the same stereo system, right? It's in our face, it's in our lives. And so we have to find ways to work with it. So one of the key things that I would suggest is when you go home and you start opening your chat GPT and you interact with your Claude or whatever chat you're working with, don't just give it questions, and it's not like Google where you just key in a question and it comes up with an answer. That answer is actually being pulled out of several iterations, thousands, millions of iterations of data that it has looked at. And so it's coming up with still a probabilistic answer, and that answer can be wrong. So there is a huge danger of hallucination still today, despite all the improvement. So don't take what it gives you at face value. Take it with a pinch of salt and then question it. Okay? And then in the questioning, you will learn a lot more. So think of it as a dialogue partner rather than a solution giver. Okay? And that's one key way to start this whole process of interacting with AI very differently from what you would do with with other kinds of technology, where you just put in input and you get an output and you accept that output. Don't accept the output, get into a dialogue with that, with the system. And that gives you a kind of a different kind of learning pattern. It also allows you to think about the whole thing in a very different way. And I found that using AI actually opens you up into thinking about things you didn't think about. And so use it and ask questions and repeatedly question it, and it comes up with some good answers, and it comes up with good explanations, which can actually be more educative than your original questions.
Thank you so much. That is such a great and inspiring answer. I feel ready to do things differently as a result. And thank you everyone who joined us today. I know you're busy and you found the time to come and ask these really important questions about what are the potential uses of AI, but also how do I implement it in an effective and ethical way. So thank you for asking those questions. And I hope you'll choose to join us and continue to learn. I think this class is really important, and I think it's something that will make you both more competitive on the job market, but also I think just better able to respond to both the potential risks and the potential benefits of this really important and, as you said, Baba, here to stay technology. So I hope we get to see you in our virtual classroom soon. Thank you for your great questions, and thank you, Baba, for a great presentation. Have a
Thank
great
you
day,
all.
everyone.
And
Bye.